real or not real. He wasn't asked to make that decision unilaterally.
No,
he was just asked to hold on a second.
So Liz, they were fake electors, and second of all, he didn't win the election. So
what do you mean when you say fake electors, though?
So you have your
man. Oh man, does Liz Wheeler owe Cenk Uygur an apology? Because what she just did to Cenk on his own show in front of his own audience is quite embarrassing. And that's what we're gonna look at in this video. Which, if you enjoy it as much as I do, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel along the way. Now let's check it out.
This is my question. Jacob Chansley, who is the guy that people call QAnon shaman, do you think if he had not been apprehended that he would have gone on to overthrow the seat of American government? What do you think would have happened to that? What do you think he would have done if he wasn't stopped?
And actually, Liz, I mean, I want to get back to the idea of Kamala Harris being an ideologue and believing politicians or not. But but just real quick, last thing on this. No, what I've always said about the rioters is that they were the pawns used by Peter Navarro, Eastman, that's Trump's lawyer, Trump himself, et cetera, that came up with a plot to delay the certification. They wanted Mike Pence to do it. When he didn't, they got people so angry they wanted to murder Mike Pence. And so the whole point of that was not to take the building and keep it. People who imply that are being super silly. That would never, ever work. No, it was to delay the proceedings so they could bring in their fake electors. And they did have fake electors. I interviewed Rudy Giuliani at the RNC, and he said the real Trump electors wouldn't do it. And so they had to bring in fake electors to do it. And Liz, that's why I'm against Donald Trump. I don't like the establishment at all. But a guy who says that he wants to terminate the Constitution, set up a fake elector scheme to overturn an election, that guy hates America. I'm not going to vote for a guy who doesn't believe in our democracy and our Constitution. So I don't understand how you guys can get past that.
Well, a couple of things. I don't think that that's an accurate characterization of what happened. I mean, if you go back in American history, in 1960, Hawaii actually rescinded the certification of their electoral votes, meaning they took back their electors because they had fraud, and they wanted to make sure that that fraud was taken care of so that people could count on the integrity of their votes. So it's not unheard of for a state. It is wonky, it is nitty gritty, it is uncommon, but it's not unheard of historically, nor is it illegal for states to reevaluate what slate of electors are sent to the vice president to count. That's actually what was asked of Vice President Mike Pence. And you can agree with what Mike Pence did, you can disagree with what Trump did, that's fine. But the accurate characterization of what happened is there were state legislatures from Pennsylvania, from Georgia, from Wisconsin, from Arizona, who actually wrote to Congress and said, well, wait a second, now that we have more information about some of the things, the electioneering is what I call it, the changing of the rules that happened before the election. Now that we have more information, we want to make sure that our election was secure. We want to make sure that the integrity of people's votes are protected. So just hold on a second before you certify to make sure that this slate of electors is actually the slate of electors that we want to send. That's what was asked of Mike Pence. He wasn't asked to judge which slate of electors was real or not real. He wasn't asked to make that decision unilaterally.
No,
he was just asked to hold on a second.
So Liz, they were fake electors, and second of all, he didn't win the election. So
what do you mean when you say fake electors, though?
So you have your slate of electors. Like today, Kamala Harris has her slate of electors, and Trump has his. Those are already in place, and they had them in 2020 as well. But Donald Trump's real electors wouldn't sign off on him winning the election because he didn't. So they had to bring in fake electors that weren't even Trump's, because they were the only ones willing to sign documents saying he won when he didn't win. I mean, Liz, you know he didn't win, right? That's not what was asked of Mike
Pence. That's not what was asked of Mike Pence. This is a really, really important point for people to understand.
No, let me clarify. What was asked of Mike Pence is don't certify so that it goes back to the states, and then we'll have the local Republicans pretend you won and install your fake electors. So
no, listen, you're familiar, I'm sure, with the 12th Amendment of the Constitution. I'm sure, familiar with how the Electoral College works. You know that, say if there's a governor of a red state, take Kansas, for example. If the governor of Kansas, which Trump won, and this is hypothetical, if he decided to send a slate of Kamala electors to the United States Congress, that would be fraudulent. That would not be how the people voted. So is there any recourse for that? Well, sure, there's recourse. He can call a joint session of his state legislature. They can send an alternate slate of electors. There are things that happen if there's any kind of fraud, and that's what hasn't been litigated in our country. That's what the question was on January 6th that Mike Pence decided that Trump disagreed with him on.
You send the real electors.
Listen to what I'm saying.
You don't invent
I know it's wonky and I know it's complicated, but your viewers probably want to know exactly what happened, because the reason that you and I both work for alternative media organizations is because we don't want to just constantly be hit with the spin of the corporate media. We want to actually engage with what the truth is. Sometimes the truth is complicated. So in my hypothetical example, there is recourse for what to do if a state sends electors, but there are people in the legislature who have a role, a constitutional role, of course, as you know, to send those electors. And if the governor of that state does not call a joint session of the legislature, well, then members of that legislature ask Pence, hold on a second while we figure this out. That's what happened.
But they already figured it out, Liz. So last two things on this. So look, number one, in a situation where one guy's trying to cheat, like the governor of Kansas, et cetera, in your hypothetical, you would then install the person's actual electors. You don't have to come up with new electors. They both have slates of electors. So that's why the fake electors gives the game away, that they were definitely wrong. Second of all, you would do that in a scenario where you actually won the vote. But Georgia did 3 recounts, a hand recount. Arizona did 2 recounts. They all did recounts. It wasn't even close. Liz, at this late date, are you still pretending that Donald Trump won the 2020 election?
Cenk is so off base here, and that's one of the things that he's really good at, and he talks about it sometimes, and is that framing the question, framing the scenario. And so you'll notice he gets the last word in before moving into the next question, or he'll ask a question with a predetermined notion of framing of the question that basically if you disagree with it, you're automatically wrong. And that's what he's doing here. And he's not even talking about apples to apples. She's literally talking about a specific scenario, and he's conflating that into this fake electors thing, which is something that I've heard him mention multiple times in the past, and I never quite understood what he's talking about. So I hope they get to the bottom of what he means by fake electors. But let's go ahead and continue.
Well, listen, I think it's really important to define the word win, because this is one of those gotcha questions that you might see on CNN or MSNBC. But what many conservatives were concerned about in the wake of the 2020 election, and a lot of conservatives feel the same way today, it's not whether the number of ballots was greater for Donald Trump or for Joe Biden. It was whether the rules were changed before people cast their ballots that allowed certain votes to be counted that otherwise shouldn't have been counted. And I'll give you a specific example of this. In the state of Wisconsin, there were ballot drop boxes placed around the state. Well, those ballot drop boxes, according to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, this was litigated afterward, are against the Wisconsin Constitution. So the people that cast those ballots, no, they specifically weren't committing fraud. They weren't voting in someone else's name, but they may have been counted invalidly. And so I think, obviously, again, it's wonky. It's not that those people were running around trying to steal people's votes, but the rules had been changed without the authority to change them. The people that changed them didn't have the authority to change them, didn't have the authority to put those drop boxes in place. And so, yes, the vote totals may have looked like they favored Joe Biden. I'm not necessarily contesting that, but were the rules rigged before the election in order to get that outcome? I would say, yes, we have evidence of that.
Yeah, it's nonsense. So the Republicans—
The Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled on it. Anybody can go look at that ruling.
I got you. No, I understand the claim you're making. My point is, Brian Kemp, for example—
Where is the Wisconsin Supreme Court wrong on that?
Hold on, let me explain. So Brian Kemp, for example, when he was running against Stacey Abrams, especially the first time, wiped away a lot of Democrats from the voter rolls, pretending that, oh, I am just getting rid of dead people on the voter rolls. Didn't do it to Republican counties, did it only to Democratic areas. It was, in my opinion, massive cheating. So I hated that election. I hated the results of that election. I thought it was an election that was illegitimate in a lot of ways. But what's done is done. I hate that that's true, but the votes were cast. You don't get to say afterwards, well, I didn't like the way you did the election. What are we gonna do, just redo it? I'm gonna pretend I won? Should Stacey Abrams have gone and rioted and tried to take the Georgia state capitol? No, we have rules. By the way, the Republicans are doing it right now. They're wiping away voter rolls all over the country. I hate that they do that, and they should be prevented ahead of time from doing that. But if we can't prevent them ahead of time and people go to vote, it is what it is. So this constantly relitigating, no, I'm not leaving office. I'm not leaving office. Everything is cheating. If I don't win, it's all cheating.
If someone who doesn't have the authority to change a rule—
Then Liz, hold on, let me finish the thought. Then, okay, you say, okay, if Kamala Harris thinks that you guys did cheating just the way that you described and just the way that I just described, since she's the vice president, she could not certify the election, right? And she could say, that's it, I'm sending it back, and I got a bunch of fake electors who are gonna come in and say I won. Hey, I thought you were cheating ahead of time.
I wanna hear your answer about Wisconsin. Was what they did in Wisconsin fair? Was that in accordance with election law?
Which part of Wisconsin? Because there's a lot of things.
When they put the ballot drop boxes all around Wisconsin, was that in accordance with the Wisconsin Constitution?
I haven't studied the Wisconsin Constitution. That's a hilarious thing to ask. But ballot drop boxes are perfectly legitimate. Republicans use them as well. In fact, right now, Donald Trump is encouraging people to vote by mail. So, I mean, you're
it's a very important question, and here's
desperately to hang on to something so you could please Donald Trump and say, "Oh yeah, you won, Donnie. You won. He didn't win."
I gave you a concrete example of a way that votes could be cast seemingly validly, but counted invalidly. And it's a concrete example. It's a very simple question. If ballot boxes are against the Wisconsin Constitution, people who didn't have the authority to put them there anyway, and those votes were then counted.
Okay, even if you find one loophole, hey, I think there was one thing that was slightly wrong in Wisconsin. How about Georgia? How about Arizona? He lost. The more you guys talk about how we don't like it. It looks terrible. Your polls go down. So I'm glad you're still sticking to that position. Now let's go back to the other thing.
Listen, you can't answer the question because you're on the wrong side of that. You can't answer the question because
no, Liz. I'm happy to adjudicate everything in the right process. What's the right process? We live in a democracy, 3 branches of government, and the right process is you go to the courts. So if you guys have gotten,
the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled on it.
Let me finish. So if you guys go to the courts and you prove that it was unconstitutional and they have a remedy for that, God bless. And you did go to the courts and you lost all 61 cases because you guys were monumentally full of crap.
What did the Wisconsin Supreme Court say?
Okay, I can ask you about some random piece
Cenk,
of court
this is my
too.
question.
I don't know what the Wisconsin Supreme Court said. Do you know what the court said when they asked Rudy Giuliani and one of the? Hold on, Liz. You know what? Let me answer. Then I'll go to you.
When you don't know about the adjudicated case.
Okay, so no, I know that you guys went to court 61 times and lost every single time. I know. I don't know if you know this. Okay, hold on. Let me do the same trick you're doing. When the court asked Rudy Giuliani, "Sir, can you please present your evidence on voter fraud?" What did Rudy Giuliani say?
Cenk, I will answer that once you answer about what the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled on this. Did they say that it made the election results, that it protected the integrity of the vote, or did they say, this is actually super interesting. Your viewers are gonna love what the Wisconsin Supreme Court said. Okay. The Wisconsin Supreme Court said, putting ballot boxes around the state of Wisconsin, which violated the Constitution of the state, was illegal, but they said this should be something that voters take care of afterward, because you do have a point, and there is a history in our country that says that once an election has been certified, once it is a certain length of time past the election, it's not in the interest of the country to yank that person out of the White House and install someone else. I don't actually disagree with you on that, but that was the problem between Election Day and between January 6th, is that's a long enough amount of time to figure out what had happened, but Democrats weren't interested in figuring out what had happened because they were the ones that rigged the election to begin with. That's dishonest.
So Liz, look, I hate what Trump did in crying and trying to overturn our democracy after he lost. But
4 minutes of filibustering from Cenk Uygur because he could not and would not answer that question. And I love how she worded it. She says, your audience is going to be really interested in learning this, because ironically, him or his audience, the majority of them, I would say at least, don't understand and aren't aware of the Supreme Court ruling in Wisconsin that he's talking about. And that's exactly what happened in the last election. They basically didn't act fast enough. The courts moved so slowly. They threw out all of these cases from Donald Trump that he brought because of standing. And then once the peaceful transition of power happened on January 20th, like it was supposed to, perfectly on time, they weren't going to go back and, yank Biden out of the presidency and install Donald Trump. It was too late. And so we've learned a lot of things, and we've had some actual ruling since that date that, had it been done beforehand, might have validated Donald Trump's request to Mike Pence to hold off a little bit and not certify the election. But hey, you know what? The Democrats get what they ask for. Instead of going into the last couple months of Donald Trump and letting him sell off into the sunset and play golf for the rest of his life, they got to worry, fear, and cower that Donald Trump might win this election, is favored to win this election next week, and they might have to deal with him for the next 4 years, which could bridge the gap between the next MAGA candidate. I don't know, maybe it'd be Eric Trump even. I don't know. I heard him talking about that on the PBD podcast the other day. And, you know, I wasn't against it so much. The guy seems really smart and, you know, you never know. It's 4 years away. But regardless, the Democrats are victims of their own nonsense, right? They want to try to say that one good example is the fact that the Democrats had Trump banned from social medias to the point where he went and started his own. And then a couple years later, that social media, when he sold some of the stock or however it works, I'm not sure exactly if he sold it or however it works, but he basically got like $4 billion because of it. I mean, he can thank the Democrats for that. The fact that he turned his head right when the assassin tried to shoot him was all because of the Democrats allowing illegal immigrants into the country. And he was looking at the graph comparing his 4 years versus Biden and Kamala's 4 years, which in my opinion is an example of how good things work for the people that love God and vice versa, right? And so anyways, Trump 2024, get yourself out there and vote early. Make sure you do vote, don't wait. And with that, I'll wrap up by asking you guys to make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And also come visit me Saturdays at 8 p.m. I go live every Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. And I'll either see you there or I'll see you in the next video.